Do you have more questions than answers? We don't have all the solutions, but we do have a community of people just like you. We are the curious, the seekers, the concerned, those into data, and those that are dreamers. And the closer we get, the better we learn. About ourselves, each other, and about our planet. Now is the time to get closer. Join us. Get your free ticket to the Learning Planet Festival. festival.learning-planet.org.
And I have the good fortune to be the moderator of a distinguished panel. And in one moment, I will invite our panel members to introduce themselves and to begin our 1 hour session together. But as you know, we are celebrating the International Day of Education. We are all members of the Learning Planet community, family, and of course, the Learning Planet Festival is now alive and well. And we have the opportunity to have one of what effectively have been 2 conversations today covering all geographies around new narratives for learning in the 21st century. And colleagues, you know that from the program that is going to be with us now over a number of days, we are exploring how we can take better care of ourselves, of each other and our planet. And we are thinking in the spirit of the most recent UNESCO report, we are thinking about rethinking our future together. This is an opportunity for us to, at this very crucial moment, to think about a way in which we can learn together in more powerful ways and to take forward a new narrative that we believe will support our own human evolution. Can I just let you know as well that we have been ensuring that we've been circulating some very key documents that will focus our attention upon transforming our learning systems across the globe. And we encourage you to look at that documentation and to join, obviously, other sessions. And sessions that will flow immediately after our panel will talk about the vision that we are going to focus upon in its implementation. A really fantastic opportunity for people to appreciate what is already happening across the globe in advancing our learning systems that will hopefully lead to greater levels of economic prosperity, to social cohesion, to individual and collective well-being. And can I just indicate that the way in which we're going to conduct this hour with the support of my panel members, so thank you very much for agreeing to this, is that we'll do it in 3 parts. And on each occasion, I'm going to ask our distinguished guests if they might just make a few comments around a key area for 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll have an exchange between us and move to the next part. The first part, I'm going to ask in a moment for each panel member to introduce themselves, which is always safer. That means that we'll get it right. So, and in doing that, I'm going to ask if they might say something about what inspires them, the nature of their work, what they are committed to, perhaps what motivates them. So to get a sense of what it is that each of our distinguished panel members at this moment see as a way of giving expression to a new narrative for education. Part 2, we're going to ask if they might think about what are really the priorities, the what. And in part 3, it's going to be the how. How can we really make a difference at this moment in time? And then at the end, I'll ensure that each panel member has the opportunity to make a closing comment. So that's the approach that we're going to take. And I'm going to ask if Vicki Colbert might go first. Vicki, could you just briefly introduce yourself and people know of your work? In fact, I think that this is the most remarkable group of people. Fantastic work that's been undertaken, but just try and capture it in a couple of minutes. Vicki.
My name is Vicki. I don't know how to say it, if Colbert or Colbert. Now with the French speakers. Anyway, I'm Colombian. I'm from Colombia. I'm right now in Bogota. I'm passionate about improving quality of especially basic education in Latin America. Fourth grade, let's say 40% of fourth graders do not understand what they read in all Latin America. So there's something about the pedagogy. And I've been working on this for a long, long time. I am founder and director of Fundación Escuela Nueva. It's a Colombian NGO after having participated in government many moments. But I decided that we had to have an NGO to continue innovating. And this is my work for the last 30 years, not only in Colombia, but in many other countries where Escuela Nueva has inspired educational reforms. By the way, it's one of the longest bottom-up innovations of the developing world that's still being sustained.
Vicki is fantastic. By the way, I can see where you're coming from because I can see the landscape. I can't see you, but you might want to bring yourself up on the screen.
Yes, I will. I will.
That's fantastic. But Vicki, tell me this though. There's a real sense, as you've said, that this has been a commitment for a significant period and remarkable achievements and hugely recognized across the international community. When we talk about a new narrative for learning, is it the same narrative with a different emphasis, or are you feeling that there is a moment now where there is the need to redefine it?
Yes, definitely. Well, it's not new, the narrative. For us, it's a new learning paradigm. And we've been talking about this for so many years, but now with the COVID situation, we can talk about our significant learnings that what we have harnessed in this past 2 years, and there are many positive things. So I want to share all this with all of you. I don't know if you want me to start sharing it right now.
Well, I want to come back to you, okay, and maybe pick up on where you think the key areas are that you are going to focus upon in this next period. But I guess there's a sense in which we are at a particular moment. Nobody, I think, has escaped the significance of some of the crises that we're facing. So I guess I wondered, in a kind of more general sense, whether you feel that there is something more urgent, more pressing at this moment, or is it simply a intensification of what has been your commitment over a period of time?
Well, it's an intensification, but what has been so interesting is that now children and teachers, it's more like a movement, they are part of this narrative, and it's a whole participatory approach that we have managed to promote. So I think this for us has been so important. And, the teachers and the children and the communities, they are the ones that they're the agents of change. So what we have done with them is just listen to them, and I think and facilitate their voices. So I think this is the most important part. There are just so many wonderful teachers, rural teachers, working in thousands of schools in Colombia and abroad, because we have inspired many educational reforms, like in Vietnam. But the issue is that, the point is that it works and there are results and it's possible. So
fantastic. No, that's brilliant. I'm going to come back to you. Amanda.
Aloha mai kako from Hawaii, everybody. My name is Amanda Ellis. I'm originally from Aotearoa in New Zealand, and now working for the amazing new Julianne Wrigley Global Futures Laboratory at Arizona State University. And that's what really inspires me. From having had a range of jobs, including lead specialist for poverty reduction and economic management at the World Bank Group, ambassador to the United Nations, and running our development agency, I was just so thrilled to meet Julie Wrigley and to hear about the work that was going on at Arizona State in terms of inclusivity. So we know in development that education is absolutely the silver bullet. So, but often there's exclusion instead of inclusion. So I love the charter at ASU that says we measure our success by those we include and how they succeed. I love the fact that things are transdisciplinary. Running the development agency, it was always a frustration to me that the big development problems on the ground were often not able to be looked at in a holistic fashion. So we really need transdisciplinary approaches, and we need solution-oriented approaches. So for me, I just love the fact that Vicki said, the children, the teachers, and the community are agents of change. And that's really what I'm seeing at this exciting new world with the Global Futures Lab. Learning is lifelong. So right from K through 12 to our latest center, Mirabella, which is for retired people who want to stay engaged, acting as mentors in the university, but also learning themselves. So I have a ton of things to say. I'm not going to monopolize, but just super excited to be here, and happy International Education Day, everybody.
Yeah, that is brilliant, Amanda. By the way, others come in as you would like to just interrogate each other. So if there's some way in which you want to just push each other a little bit, please feel free. Amanda, I have to say, Arizona State University has got a global reputation for innovation, but it's also got a global reputation, i.e. it is outward facing. Yep. And I think I just want to just push you a little bit on that, because that's not always the case in the US, where there's a real sense of commitment, I think, to global issues, because it's often a sense of what is happening within the geography. But I take it that the Institute is absolutely dedicated to a global orientation.
Absolutely. The Global Futures Lab says it all. But we're also really lucky to have the leadership of Michael Crow, who is an incredible visionary. Everybody calls him an inspiration machine, and he is. He's such a motivator, and no idea is too small. So last week I was just on campus and I was using the new VR virtual reality Dreamscape Learn to learn about biology, going to an alien planet and being a scientist. And as someone who went to a girls' school at the bottom of the South Island of New Zealand, where girls didn't need to know about science. So we actually had the sewing teacher for science and we had the phys ed teacher for maths, but we got great classes in how to paint our nails. You know, it was crazy. So for me now, at my advanced old age, it is so exciting to be able to see all these different learning modalities. And as we've seen through the pandemic, the ability to pivot and to innovate was absolutely critical. And ASU does, as you say, have a global reputation because we want to make sure that education is available to everyone. And the online classes, ASU for You, available to everyone. Go online and there's a whole suite. And in fact, just this past week, Thunderbird at ASU announced a project of 100 million learners by 2030, all free, 5 self-paced learning modules in 40 languages. So it's such an exciting place to be.
That's fantastic. Well, Katie, you're just a little further north than Arizona. Yeah, so tell us where you're coming from and just do an introduction and let us know what's inspiring you at the moment. What is your work?
Hi, everyone. My name's Katie, and I'm in New Jersey in the United States, so it's a little bit east. But right now, I am a part of Girl Up in the United States and a part of the Learning Planet Youth Council. And just in the past year, I've been involved in activism and didn't realize that so much change needed to happen and that I could even be a part of that change. But with working with Learning Planet and Girl Up, I've realized that education for all is necessary, but useful education for all is important, because if the information that we're learning is an imperative to our future, it's not needed. So we need to make sure that our educational resources can be spread equally around countries, especially those with large economic disparities. And right now I'm just focusing on the youth voice getting out there so that we can make change in our legislation and education systems so that we can decide the best way for our education to proceed.
And can you just say a word about getting the youth voice out there? Because there really is a sense, I would have thought, that this is the moment in which the youth voice is loud and clear. Are you feeling it?
Yes, definitely. Like, just joining with Learning Planet Youth Council, there are so many people around the world who want to fight for the same things I have, and we have separate youth council groups, and right now I'm working with the youth rights group to start a camp for girls that we can share our voice so that we know we're valued. So it is so important because the youth voice is as loud as ever, and we want to make change in our education.
And when you say you want to make change, if you had to kind of like identify, I guess what I was saying to Vicki about what is new, can you capture what you feel is the shift that you are advocating?
I think that our education, especially our science classes, need to focus on what's happening in the world and not what's happening in the textbook. We need to be more aware of what's happening with climate change and with economic disparity, and we need to learn how to make greater change in the world and not just get an A on a test. So we need to go away from just learning the information and learning how we're going to change the world.
Brilliant. I'm going to come back and get more detail on that. Fantastic. Mem, can you say a word, because it seems to me as if you identify pretty strongly with exactly what Katie's just saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I'm from Malawi, and just a little bit background of myself. I led a big campaign in Malawi on ending child marriage and raising the legal marriage age from 15 to 18. And actually, this relates quite a lot when it comes to promoting education, because in developing countries like Malawi, where a lot of girls and children drop out of school, it means like we have a higher percentage of young people who are not in school, and this is actually, it creates a very big problem. And that's where my advocacy comes in, whereby my work surrounds promoting education for young people, so that at least a lot of children gets to be in school and complete secondary education.
Anisha, by the way, sorry, just before I come to Anisha, Memory, can you come on screen, or are you? Do you need to be off camera?
I want to come on screen, but unfortunately, when I click, I want to come on screen. It's not like I can't get on. It's when I click okay, yeah. I think maybe someone from technical can take me through.
Well, don't worry, because we can hear you loud and clear. If we can get you on screen, that's fantastic. Hey, let me just pick up on one point that you've made there, because we're talking about new narratives for learning. And tell me, how do you think about school as a place of learning, and how do you think about learning that takes place in wider environments? When you think about a narrative for learning, do you think about a school, or do you think about different environments?
It's not just school. When I think about school, I think about different environments. You know how like too often we constrict school just being in a school environment. But as you have seen, the world recently has changed. With COVID-19, a lot of things have come out that school cannot just be constricted in a classroom. You know, online school is also actually becoming one of the great tools that is actually transforming this generation. And beyond that, I feel like including technology as it is now, it's a way to go when it comes to changing the paradigm of you know, ensuring that children everywhere access education. And at the same time, I'm looking at it, I'm looking at the education sector as something that is really transforming. Like I'm looking at it in the African perspective, where I'm seeing, you know, the gender transformative shift in this system itself, where we look at the curriculum, it's not the way how it was, and that's one thing that I'm actually advocating for, so that we have inclusive curriculum delivery, where gender aspects should be included in the curriculum.
Yeah. And just before I come to you, Vicki, what Mem said must resonate with you, because the way in which we think about the institution in different environments is something surely that's been a barrier to the kind of transformation that we want. What's your reaction to what Mem said about the places of learning?
Totally. I think I mean, education is an activity. It's not a place. No? And so for us, it was so interesting to see how children were learning in their communities, in their homes. They were forced to because of the COVID situation. So we have a lot to share about our significant learnings for these past 2 years. So I just wanted to highlight that. Of course, school is important. You know, the physical presence, social emotional dimension, all these new social emotional skills are so important. But for learning, I mean, we've been using self-paced learning modules for ages, you know, and the children themselves were the first ones to take them out and start working in the COVID situation. So they started the innovation with their teachers. So they gave us the clue. So we continued working on this. I'll continue a little bit more afterwards.
Yeah, that'd be great. Anisha, can you say something? Take a moment, because I think when we talk about new narratives for learning, and I think about your work with the ILO, and I think about the challenges that you face, it extends this conversation into, I think, far more demanding and challenging environments. So just help us to understand the scope of the work.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to present to you, as far as I can, the work we are doing, and also my motivation for taking part of it. I am the French government representative to the governing body of the International Labour Organization, but also since 2-3 years ago, I have been appointed as the chair of the global partnership, a new global UN global partnership. You have the logo just in the background, which is Alliance 8.7. And I just explained to you what it is. You know that one of the reasons why we have this dedication of a special day to education by the international community and also the UNESCO at first place is to show and reaffirm that education plays an essential role in building sustainable and resilient societies, and also that it contributes to the achievement of the other sustainable development goals. And 8.7 is the target 8.7 of the SDGs, and it is all about eliminating child labor, forced labor, human trafficking, and modern slavery by 2025 for child labor and 2030 for all the other challenges. And I was very happy to hear about what Memory Banda just said, because in the realm of modern slavery, we also count forced marriages, because child labor as well as forced marriages are main causes of the children not going to school. And it is very important that we put all together, we join all our forces to put an end and eliminate child labor and forced marriages. And the challenge, I just wanted to, you just told me, it's of considerable magnitude. It is accentuated, as you already said, many of you, since 2020 with the economic and social effects of the pandemic crisis. And I just want to give you the scope, of the challenge, tell you that in 2020, the ILO and UNICEF just released global estimates about child labor worldwide. And what you should know is that child labor has worsened for the first time in more than 20 years. The number of children involved in child labor is expected to reach 160 million worldwide 2020. So this is an increase of 8.4 million children under the age of 15 in 4 years. And what you should also know is that the COVID consequence, as it is projected right now, should bring 9 million extra children to work. So this is the reason why it is so important today that we join our forces, but also that we innovate, because at the pace we are working right now, even with this alliance, which is a very powerful instrument, and I will just tell it when we get to the how. But if we go at the pace that we are right now, we will never ever reach the SDG achievement, in 2025 or in 2030.
Yeah, I mean that is such a challenging and demanding agenda. If you had to try and capture how you would argue the case for the globe to finally come to terms, right, with the magnitude of the challenge, I'm not suggesting for one moment that all of the other dimensions of a new narrative are not equally compelling. They are. But how would you capture the imperative at this moment within the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, within the context of what has happened in the last couple of years, as you said, further exacerbated by COVID? How are you at a point where you think the kind of urgency of this is finally starting to become understood?
Well, I would tell you two things. The first one is we must make sure that everybody understands it is a matter of shared responsibility. Because most of the time, we think that developing countries are responsible of their child labor.
Yeah.
And they are the ones that can change things. And we think that the only way we can just bring them to results is to give them, economic and technical assistance. The first thing, so in that realm, is that I think that developed countries, our governments, like the French one and the others, have a huge responsibility in that, which is the fact that our companies, global supply chains, have a specific role to play to make sure that their economic models do not rely on child labor at the end of the chain. So we have this very important education to give to our companies in this issue. The second maybe solution I would put forward is the fact that education on the fact that child labor should be suppressed in order to get children at school should be given also to their parents. It is not only a matter of children. This is also a matter of parents and parenthood. And also the fact that general public, the youth and consumers, have also a specific role to play in order to get back children at school.
Brilliant. Vicki, let me go to you and say, as we think about the way in which we should use our energies and our effort, before we actually get to how we might do it, right? What we should really focus on. I'm getting a chat stream of contributions from this morning's panel, this morning Paris time, right? In which a number of the panel members said, listen, this is the future of the human species we're talking about, right? This is not a small agenda. Vicki, this is the moment in which we have to become more human. We have to connect with our own planet in the most serious way that, of course, climate change has encouraged. But it goes further than that. It goes to the very nature of our relationship with all living things, our relationship with nature. So Vicki, as you sort of think about where you'd put your effort now in this next period, do you define it in learning terms? And if you do, how do you capture the essence of what we have to focus on?
Well, I think what we learned from COVID is it forced us to go to the essence of the educational process, especially the pedagogy, because in Latin America, all changes are administrative. All educational reforms in Latin America are administrative. Everybody's just learning how to decentralize, but they forgot the human dimension and they forgot the pedagogy. So I think, one of the most important things is we saw, which is nothing is new of what we're saying, is the shift of the essence is the learner. We should focus on the learner, and we should start talking about the new role of the teacher as a mentor, a guide, a facilitator. We still have, teachers as transmitters of instruction, and that is changing. That has to change. The COVID forced us to do it, and the concept of space, how the learning can take place in different places, at home, at the community, and this is so important, and especially with the participation of parents and community. So in respect to this, we saw these changes and we went out to the essence. So we were so happy to see, we were forced to be student-centered. We were forced to change the role of the teacher. The parents were forced to come into the picture in the community. So, what we were trying to do for 30 years came naturally. So I think this is a good dimension.
Hey, Vicki, given that, does that mean that we have somehow managed to recapture the relational, that the educative process is about relationship, but at the same time, we are talking about a future in which we need young people to have incredibly complex competencies to help us solve the biggest problems, right, that the globe has ever faced. So how do we handle an education agenda that, on the one hand, recaptures, as you said, the essence of learning and relationships, and yet, on the other, is responsible for ensuring that we all have the necessary complex competencies to be able to deal with all of the challenges that we're facing? How do you position that agenda?
When we make this pedagogical shift from teacher-centered as the essence of instruction to the student-centered as a student that participates actively in their own process, we started seeing these wonderful changes. And we started seeing, we have school governments where children, it's a whole participatory approach, where all these 21st century skills, learning to, what a robot will not do in the future, cannot do in the future, is learning to learn, learning to take initiatives, learning to lead processes, but especially learning to work in teams. Cooperative learning is the essence of Escuela Nueva. Personalized, it's a balance between self-paced learning, personalized learning, a new role of the teacher, and cooperative learning, where children learn through dialogue and interaction among themselves. So this makes a tremendous change, because this is a human dimension, talking about social emotional skills also. This is so crucial for that, for really strengthening that human dimension. And also in relation to the states as being, the state as being the only deliverer of education. No, all the conferences in education since years back, they said education is so important. We cannot leave it only in the hands of the states. It's a responsibility of all civil society and private sector. So we have to go back. This is the essence of alliances. This is when we really have to have alliances between all the sectors.
And Vicki, let me just push you one point on that, because this is a huge debate about the fact that learning is everybody's business, and that in fact it takes all sectors to come together. And yet there's a real anxiety around whether or not privatization, marketization, will actually lead to, and Amanda, I'm going to come to you on this, will lead to real concerns about inclusivity, about ensuring that we get equity. How do you handle the equity challenge at the same time as you talk about learning being everybody's business, and yet there are those who want to hold on to their privilege?
Well, in our situation, health and education, especially basic education, health and education are a responsibility of the state, but we have to help the state. We have to help the state to do a better job. It's their responsibility, but we have to learn to work and make these alliances. I know it's not easy, but you have to learn public-private partnerships. This is so important. For example, we had to create an NGO to help the state incorporate quality in what they were doing with rural education in Colombia. And this demonstrates that, yes, it can be done. I mean, it's not easy, it's tough, you have to be very patient. Education results take time. Now, the equity issue, we have demonstrated how we compensate. Good quality basic education compensates for socioeconomic inequalities. We have seen that. We have a strong back of evidence demonstrating this. It can be done. But we just have to, something very important, at least in our region, we have to build on accumulated scientific results, scientific knowledge. We tend to forget this. And we know these things for ages. We just have to get down and do it and work on it. But it can be done. So it's not privatization. It's just the responsibility of civil society coming into the picture, helping the state to improve quality.
Yeah, this is really important that we get that language right. It's civil society. Yeah. Amanda, it strikes me that you and Vicki are not too far removed from each other in terms of the agenda. But I mean, how do you express this in sustainability and innovation terms, particularly in innovation terms? Because clearly at the center of your work is that we are not going to keep on doing the same things. We are going to do things differently. Well, what is the difference that will take forward a new narrative for learning that will deal with the purpose that you outlined in your opening remarks?
Thank you, Anthony. And before I go to the difference, let me focus on the similarities with Vicki, because when she talked about the benefits of good quality education, as an economist, the positive externalities that accrue to society from a good basic education are so well proven now. And that's why education is the silver bullet. But to go to Vicki's second point about the essence of alliances, for me, there's also this notion of radical collaboration. And I'm looking at Katie and thinking, we just partnered with Girl Up last year and with the World Bank, my old project, Women, Business and the Law, which is documenting all of the laws that impact women's ability to be economically active. And here we are in 2022 with only 10 countries that even have legislated gender equality under the law. So we partnered with Girl Up, and they got out the message to all their clubs in terms of how to be advocates for positive change with their MPs to really create a movement. And for me, this is the essence of the new education and the new learning and innovation. So there's innovation on the technological side, which we've covered, and that is super exciting because it means that right through to virtual reality, we have these new tools at our disposal. So it does democratize education. But there's also the how. And this notion of radical inclusion and radical collaboration is really critical. Now, if the pandemic taught us anything, it taught us two things. The first of all, that we are a global village. So what I do impacts you and vice versa. And I think everybody really understands that now. I think as the Secretary General said, I'm not safe until you're safe, and you're not safe until I'm safe. And then realizing also this notion of exponentiality with the current code red for humanity that we have. We saw it took 3 months for the first 1 million cases. There were 1 million cases just in the US in a day last week. So, we're seeing this notion of exponentiality if we don't act. And I think for me, in terms of your big question about the what, the centrality of the climate crisis and everybody needing to understand about our planet and how it works is absolutely critical. The not learning what we need to was raised by one of the panel. That is so true. And in fact, it's youth who have really put the spotlight on that. The Fridays for Future movement, which started with Greta Thunberg and one person doing a school strike, has spread to tens of millions. And it is a global protest, not only that adults are not acting in the best interests of future generations, but also that the school system is failing everybody. We are not teaching children what needs to be taught in the classrooms. And for me, it was fascinating to see at this most recent Conference of the Parties of the UN Framework on Climate Change Convention in Glasgow, that for the first time, there was a meeting of ministers of education led by Italy. And UNESCO's survey of over 100 countries showed that less than half had climate education. So for me, a big what is we need to be making climate education fundamental. So I could go on, but perhaps I'll come back in the third frame about how it is we actually do that. But I would say three things: understanding the science, really helping people understand global governance and their dimension in that, and then how it is we can act as agents of change and transformation through innovation in technology, but through radical inclusion and radical collaboration.
That leads me perfectly, Katie, to you and to Mem about the force and power of young people themselves. Yeah, because this morning's session was raising the question about, can we really get a change in our systems of education, from a shift in governance, from a shift in the way in which government operates. Vicki, I think your point about partnership with civil society is absolutely crucial. But the other point was being made, Katie, that this has got to be young people themselves, active, demanding, right, their own agency. Are you feeling that this really is the shift that you are experiencing? You're not waiting for institutional change.
No, I think the change is happening with youth people, but it needs to be at a larger scale. There are so many individual organizations in different countries, but I feel like if youth are able to mobilize as one whole unit and make changes within their small communities, it'll spread to entire countries. And I think that starts with your school and your school community. And that also leads us to inequity, because not everyone is able to access the same type of schools. Like education has never really been a question for me, and that's something I'm trying hard to change. And so if I'm able to work with youth in other countries who have access to education, who want to give it to all, we'll be able to make change within our own systems.
Katie, let me just get a sense of what is giving you that level of optimism at this point, because there's plenty of other forces operating that might make you feel a little less optimistic, but you don't come across that way.
No, I think about a year ago, I was definitely pessimistic about the state of my education, but I found Learning Planet and found so many people who want to make the same changes I do. And I didn't realize that, like, being in a community where there are only a few people, it spreads to the entire world, and you don't have to feel isolated. You need to find people and form alliances that help you spread your agenda as far as you want. So it makes me feel optimistic that there are so many people like me, and I'm not just trying to do it all by myself.
I get that. Mem, I take it that is partly your experience, but let me just put you on the spot. I mean, if we're really going to get a shift in the kind of learning that we need for the outcomes that you are advocating, what is it that you're going to focus on in the next couple of years?
Well, I think it'll be more of an extension of what is already is happening right now, and I will take it back to what Katie is just explaining about bringing about a positive revolution through young people. I believe that as young people, we are working on different issues, environment, and they are like. It comes in all broad aspects, and that's one thing that is key, is ensuring that we continuously empower young people to take part in different levels of development. And one way is what Amanda was just talking about at governance level. We have seen a lot of young people rising in different countries where they're bringing in about different change that they need from their states, and that's one big change that is happening across the world, where young people are taking issues into their hands. We are not just sitting down, to say, okay, these big leaders, they'll do it all. But young people, we are going into the streets, making sure that whatever we want to change is happening right now and then. And that's a bigger shift that I'm seeing across the world.
Hey, let me just ask you this. When you are confronted with the challenges that young people face, that families face, that communities face in a real time, day-to-day environment, how do you capture the vision of what it is that you see as a future? And that future clearly cannot be too far in the distance. How do you capture the essence of the agenda so that it does motivate, it does inspire, it does give energy, it does give hope?
Well, for me, I'll take it to the angle of building intergenerational conversations. That's one key factor that I've seen that brings about radical change in all aspects. And one thing that too often that is forgotten is that we cannot run away from our past, and we learn from what has happened from the past. And that's one thing that we learn from the older generation. So for me, it has always been about building intergenerational conversations where the young people are learning from the older generation to bring about different changes that are happening. And for me, when I see the future, I see that things can only change if we collectively work together, where different efforts, we've been talking about, the civil society, the private sectors coming together to ensure that we work together towards ensuring quality education. And for me, quality education is very important, coming from a developing country like Malawi, where only about 35% of children complete primary education. And that's one big gap that is there, where we are talking about access to education right here. And in the context that Vicki was talking about, I was thinking about it. I'm like, we're having all these important conversations, and looking at Africa, we are far much behind from much of the realities, and there is a lot of change that needs to be done in terms of promoting education in Africa, in developing countries like Malawi.
I get that. Anusha, I've got to ask you this because there are a couple of comments here, and there have been comments about the role of our international organizations. Doesn't matter whether it's ILO or UNESCO or World Bank or OECD. I mean, have we got a sense in which these remarkable international bodies can bring the kind of firepower, right, to make the shifts on the ground with communities across generations? Are you connecting with the lived experience that Katie and Mem and Vicki and Amanda are talking about? How do you handle that when you think about the agenda?
Thank you very much. I mean, international organizations by themselves could not achieve these goals if they are isolated from civil society, governments, social partners in case of the ILO, and in other cases, companies, and of course, NGOs. So one example, because you talked about alliances, is Alliance 8.7. Since the last 5-6 years, we thought that we must create this kind of partnership, which is a little bit, not so popular, in the UN system, but there are some. But this one is very interesting because we've put together international organizations, regional organizations, governments, social partners, companies, NGOs, academics, etc., all together in order to propose things, create knowledge about the phenomena of child labor, forced labor, etc. But this alliance by itself, which is a very heavy thing, to chair, I can tell you, it is not making the difference on the ground. This is why, since a few years ago, we have started promoting a specific strategy to put forward pathfinder countries. And what does it mean to be a pathfinder country? A pathfinder country is a country with a big prevalence of these issues, you know, child labor, forced labor, so mainly in Africa, Asia, Latin America, etc., that takes, you know, the engagement to have a specific strategy in order to respond to these challenges. And what we do at the central level, multilateral level, is give them knowledge, but also monitoring instruments and evaluation instruments so that they show progress, so that the label we give them is not just a blue washing, you know, concept, but also something that makes the difference. And since I am the chair, I have decided that right now we have 25 Pathfinder countries all over the world, that developed countries should be Pathfinder countries too, because of the shared responsibility between developing and developed countries. So France has become a Pathfinder country, Netherlands has become a Pathfinder country, and Germany will become one. And this is the way we can just organize, you know, the bottom up and in a way, enrichment of these alliances to get into better progress. But then we have another challenge on which we are working right now, is how to give floor to the youth and other survivors, you know, child labor survivors, forced labor survivors, to have a voice in our governance, but also in countries, so that we can get what you said also about the way we can carry out through school education, but also the way we can raise awareness of parents, because, you know, we know that part of child labor is because of lack of livelihood, parental, you know, family livelihood, because of lack of social protection for children and for their families. But a large part of child labor comes also from the voluntary efforts of parents. So this is very important that we can raise awareness, but also empower parents in this issue. And also the youth in developed countries, so that they could put pressure on their governments, but also at the international level, so that the things change. This is what, in a way, the youth made with climate change. And this is a very important experience from which we should, you know, take all the lessons we need in other realms, as education, or in my case, child labor, forced labor. Thank you.
See, Anusha, that's beautiful, because what you've done is I'm going to do this in reverse order. I'll just get you to make a final comment. I think that you've taken us into the space of, as you said, how do we make things happen on the ground? It sounds as if the tactics, the strategies, the approaches that you're now taking, you believe will have greater impact. This is a different way of doing the work. Have I got that right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, because I want to get whether or not that's the case with others. Whether or not, Amanda, tell me, do you believe that you have thought differently about how you can have impact? Is your theory of action now somewhat different than it would have been previously? What it captured the essence of the approach.
Absolutely. Yes, and I think that's why I'm feeling so optimistic instead of pessimistic as I was before. And I wanted to share something. This Turn It Around project was sponsored by UNESCO, but it was actually youth from around the world who used art as a vehicle for change. And I think this ties into the points that Anusha made previously. This one is tell leaders what you want them to know when they make decisions about your future. we depend on your decisions. And the art is from India, the text is from the US. And these wonderful, wonderful cards are a global project of youth around the world who have painted and written to tell policymakers what they want them to think about in designing the future. So that for me is, let's use art, yet let's use poetry, let's use both left and right brain. But in terms of the actual what, I wanted to run through with you just the gamut of different learning modalities and audiences, because I think
you've got a very generous 1 minute, Amanda.
Okay. So thinking about from ASU for You, which is everybody, the notion of lifelong learning, our University Design Institute, which helps universities around the world rethink innovation, and then partnerships. We have partnered with parliamentarians on gender equality, and I've just popped in the chat, gender equality and climate. We partner with a woman-led business on educating board directors about climate. We partner with the New Carbon Economy Consortium and the Earth League on the latest in climate science. So I think there's a whole gamut. This idea of radical inclusion and radical collaboration are my last words. And I want to quote from the report that education has to do more than respond to a changing world. Education actually transforms the world.
Yes.
Beautiful. By the way, can I tell you, your radical inclusion comments are starting to get, as you can see in the chat, some considerable response. We're going to actually advance that. Ma'am, let me ask you this, because it's the same question. Is there a sense in which you are learning how to do this work to get greater impact?
Well, for me, really, I would like to go back to Amanda, and I have so much interest in art coming from the art background. I feel like using art is one of the powerful ways how we can, it's easier for children in their space to learn through, including art in different aspects. And at the same time, referring back to the country where I come from, using gender transformative approach during lecturing time, it's very, very important. And that's one thing that bring about inclusivity in the learning agenda. And that's very, very key aspect to include in the learning process.
Brilliant. Katie, I love the fact that you called out Learning Planet, and the fact that one thing that clearly you are using is the power of the alliances. Yep, the sense of the collective commitment here. How would you sharpen that up?
I think it's all about what Learning Planet's doing with the Youth Council and finding distinct members in different countries that want one common goal. And I think that if we find individual members across the world who want to change education with the youth voice and have youth be involved, there will be so much change, because if we're able to start with one collective idea and work with one organization, we can almost pinpoint the change we want to make instead of trying to change the whole world at once.
I love it. You capture the essence of this so superbly. Vicki, let me give you the last word. I have to say to you that there are many of us who have admired all of the work that's been represented here, and certainly your work. You've got a kind of unique perspective on a capacity to look back and look forward. This is actually a moment in time, and surely we have got to make sure that we use this next couple of years to get a new narrative for learning that will be in the interests of our own human condition. Tell us, from your point of view, how are we really going to do this and make a really significant difference on the ground, to use the language that has been used in this conversation?
We have to learn to transform complexity into simple, manageable action. This is something so important for us. We have to start bottom up. It's crucial for anything that you do. And I see that, you just having the participants be the agents of change is so crucial. And this is what we've been seeing, and they're giving us the responses. And it's more, in our case, it's more like a movement now, you know. And also, let's say, even though we don't have, for example, connectivity in rural areas in Colombia, this strengthened our self-paced learning modules, but the teachers they did have connectivity in the small towns. So we had a small Renueva, our virtual campus, very weak. The teachers were very shy to get in. But at this moment, we have thousands of teachers participating. So technology is crucial, it's important, but you need a new pedagogical paradigm. Just introducing technology in the classrooms without changing your pedagogical paradigm perpetuates at a higher cost than traditional technique. So we have to learn how to work with all this. And last but not least, you have to learn to work with governments, because you have to have impact and coverage, but you need the role of public-private partnerships and the role of civil society for two key words. And this is my lesson learned after so many years: for quality and sustainability.
Well, what a superb way to bring what is both inspiring and uplifting in this conversation. And I have to say, Olivia, who's listening to this, who moderated the earlier panel, might agree with me that these have been two parts of a whole. The conversation at this point of really being able to capture a future agenda, new narratives, has come through loud and clear. Can I thank you each for a wonderful contribution. Others will now be able to identify in subsequent sessions where this is taking place on the ground, as you have, but with further illustrations. So in the spirit, Katie, that you have introduced, the Learning Planet Festival gives us momentum. Yep. It gives us, I think, considerable hope that in fact we are going to actually have these new narratives. And as a result, we will have a future that's worth having. Thank you all. And thank you, colleagues, for joining us.
Thank you.
Wonderful to see all of you. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.